Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, joining us live from California, Gail Falkenthal of Community Digital News. Joining us live from Taiwan, Sean Newton. Joining us live from the UK, the only one and only Mr. Boxing Addict. How you doing, ladies and gents?
Excellent. Thank you. Nice to be back.
Good, thanks,
It's been a while.
Yeah, after a month or so off, because quite frankly, boxing has been boring. Nothing been really happening. We're back, talking more boxing stuff, talking all things boxing. For those who are new to the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report is a live YouTube show / blog / podcast that discusses all things boxing. If you want to find information about the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, one really main place you want to go to, that's the Pound for Pound Boxing Report blog page. The link for that is p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com, and repeat that, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. And on the blog page, you will find articles written by yours truly, as well as special contributor KBC Live, aka Kayla Lewis. Also on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report blog page, you will find links to where to find all things Pound for Pound Boxing Report all over social media, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Tumblr, on Google+. We have this page where we do the show. We have also another Google+ page where I do news and whatnot, as well as share stuff from the blog. I mentioned we're on Twitter. We got a Pinterest board. We're on Podomatic, and the link for that is p4pboxingreport.podomatic.com. That's where you can find all previous episodes of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report podcast page. Also, the RSS feed, which you can subscribe to. We're on Stitcher Radio. Just go to stitcherradio.com. Just do a quick search of boxing. You should be able to find us. If not, just look up Pound for Pound Boxing Report. That's POUND, the number 4, Boxing Report. Let me repeat that, POUND, the number 4, Boxing Report. And be a friend, be a pal, be a buddy. Check us out on Stitcher Radio. Tell us what you think about the show, and also leave comments on where we can improve the show. And lastly, we got a link to where you can donate your account, and what happens to that is, the link to donate your account is donateyouraccount.com/P4P Boxing Report. Let me repeat that, donateyouraccount.com/P4P Boxing Report. Should you donate your Twitter account, any tweets that come from the Pound for Pound Boxing Report Twitter page, your Twitter account will automatically have the ability to retweet any tweet that comes from Pound for Pound Boxing Report Twitter page. With all those homework issues out the way, let's get the show started tonight. Just doing a recap of what happened this past weekend. Only one significant fight of note, as Brian Rose, coming off of stoppage loss to Demetrius Andrade late last year, came back into the ring against Carson Jones, not a perennial contender, but kind of a stepping stone guy. Best known recently for his 2 fights with Kell Brook. First fight was he gave Kell Brook a very tough fight. Second fight, not so much, as Kell Brook stopped it, I believe, in 8 rounds. The big talk going in was Carson Jones said if he was to lose this fight to Brian Jones, he would retire. Rose was the favorite coming in, but we had an upset, ladies and gents, as Carson Jones stopped Brian Rose by first round TKO. Rose, early in the fight, he had control. I thought he shook up Jones with some shots. And then next thing you know, Jones caught Rose, I believe, with the right hand and followed up with the left hook. Had him stumbling a bit, had him visibly hurt. It seemed like Rose had the ability to last the round, but all of a sudden, the referee, he stepped in and stopped the fight. I'll go to you on this one, Boxing Addict, since this took place in your neck of the woods. Shout out to EJ Boxing Live, by the way. I got the information about this fight from him. I was shocked when I first heard him report on it, but upon seeing the fight, to me, the stoppage was a little bit controversial. Was Brian Rose hurt? Yes. Visibly hurt. But I think when the referee stopped in, I think that Brian Rose, he could have recovered from being hurt in that fight. I think he could have lasted the round and possibly gone ahead and win the rest of the fight because he was controlling that bout in the early part of that first round up to that point. What's the word in the aftermath? Because I've been hearing a lot on Twitter and on social media in general that this was a controversial stoppage. I've heard some folks from your neck of the woods who have their own podcasts and who do their own shows and whatnot saying this is travesty is a wrong word, is a too strong of a word to use, but I think that this was unjust, that this was a case of British referees in particular stepping in too early to stop the bout being a little bit sensitive, overly sensitive here. So I'll go to you on this one, Addie. Your thoughts, first of all, your thoughts of the upset, and your thoughts on the referee stepping in and stopping the fight.
Yeah, well, let me set the scene on this one. The fight was held in Blackpool, which was, or is, Brian Rose's hometown, and it was actually top of the bill of the prize fighter card, which actually, incidentally, turned out to be a brilliant prize fighter with lots of knockouts and stuff. But anyway, Brian Rose came on later, topping the bill. Everyone expected him to win. We all know Carson's can be dangerous, you know, did well against Colebrook, etc. But, you know, Rose was expected to win. He came out, Rose boxed really well. He hurt Jones a couple of times. And then he got caught himself. Now, he got caught, and he got caught pretty flush. He wobbled a bit. He got hit a few more times, and the referee jumped in and stopped it. Now, that referee, in my opinion, I've seen him a few times. Ian John Lewis, he's a disgrace, really. I don't like him. He's done this before, and he kind of jumps in as guys are throwing punches and stuff, and you know the fans don't really know what's happening. Then he'll take a look at the guy and decide whether he's stopping him or not. I mean, British referees are terrible at the moment. This goes back to, unfortunately, the Nigel Benn, Gerald McClellan situation that happened a long time ago.
20 years ago, later on this month.
It is. It's actually the anniversary of that very soon. And, I mean, that was just an unbelievable fight from start to finish, with obviously a horrible ending with McClellan being seriously injured. But what you've got to think about is, shortly after that fight, and that fight went out on ITV when there was no Sky Television, there was only 4 or 5 channels in Britain, and that fight got something like 18 million viewers, and there's only 55 million people in Britain, so, you know, a lot of people watched that fight. And what happened was, the next day, there was a massive clamour for boxing to be banned in Britain. And it nearly got to the stage government voted on it and everything. It was a huge thing, and it could have been totally detrimental to boxing here. So since then, the British Board of Boxing Control have come out with very strict rules, and the referees, you can tell, ever since, and even more, it's more noticeable even in the last few years, that they stop fights very early. If one of the opponents has been hurt, they'll jump in very quickly and stop it. But this one, I mean, Rose was hurt, but you know, there's 10 seconds left in the first round of a fight. Now, Rose got an absolute hammering from Andrade for about 5 or 6 rounds, however long it lasted, when he went over there to challenge him for the title. And the referee in that fight let Rose carry on. He was hurt quite a few times, and he eventually stopped it, and it was a good decision. And I think John Lewis should have let the fight carry on until there was a knockdown, or, because, you know, what I think would have happened was Rose would have survived. He still had his hands up. He was up against the ropes when he stopped it. And he'd have survived. He'd have got a minute's break, and he'd have come out and probably boxed Carson's head off and stopped him. So I thought it was a bad decision, but there you go.
I go to you on this, Miguel and Sean. Your perception of the fight. Respond to what Boxing Addict was referring to, talking about in terms of maybe a little bit oversensitivity and overreaction based on what has happened in the past, particularly in England, not just with Ben McClellan, but also with Paul Ingle and his bout later on. I think it was in 2001. We can go even further back to the second fight between Eubank and Michael Watson.
Sure.
Your response to that, and lastly, I think there'll probably be a rematch. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, the referees have a tough job, and if they're going to screw up, they want to screw up by stopping the fight too soon rather than too late. In this case, they were within 30 seconds of the round ending when it was called. Boy, that is really a tough call, especially in very early rounds of a fight. I would like to see them inclined to let it go when someone gets hurt early. It's a different story if something like that happens in the 8th or 9th round and they've already got some mileage on them. On the other hand, you don't want to see that be the last time a guy is in the ring. And given the history, it is understandable why it happened, why we like it or not. It's interesting. You've got a guy here that was absolutely wiped out, by Andrade, and just a messy situation all the way around by the way it happened. I think a rematch would be good for everybody. The truth is, what else is Eddie Hearn gonna do? I think a rematch is right now the only option. So, it'd be worth seeing.
Your thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, better safe than sorry. It's unfortunate that sometimes these things happen, but I mean, we're happier to discuss the fact that there should be a rematch as opposed to some of the unfortunate circumstances that have happened in boxing. And with a lot of the PC people in the world now, I mean, you don't want too much negative press towards boxing because, I mean, we still enjoy the sport, so we don't want anyone trying to stop it.
Yeah, I agree with the overall assessment here that the stoppage was a little bit too quick. But in that the fight, yeah, there should be a rematch. I have no problem with that. As Gail said, what else is Eddie Hearn going to do? I mean, Carson Jones, he's earned himself one payday, based on that upset win. And Rose, he could probably get a rematch and probably win. I think he will win a rematch against Carson Jones by a pretty comfortable margin here. So the controversy sells, and it will sell the rematch here. So that's the deal.
What else do these two guys have going forward anyways?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Neither of them are really
with
in position.
Yeah,
Well,
it's not like either of you guys are B or A level opponents or really contenders here. So it's just a nice little controversy. Get one more fight, get Jones one more payday, create a nice little buzz maybe there in England, and just Jones will win. In my estimation, it will be the end of that.
Yeah, Rose has done amazingly well to make it.
Brian Rose will win, not Jones. But Brian Rose, I believe, will win.
Yeah, I was wondering there for a second what you were talking about.
I'm sorry, my bad. But yeah, Brian Rose, he will win the rematch, and it'll just be that. He'll just move on.
He's British level, really, Rose. But my point was really when we see. I mean, if you remember back to say Ortiz versus Maidana, or even that fight the other week, who was the guy you compared him to? Tommy Hearns in his style. He's the up-and-coming guy. There was about 5 or 6 knockdowns in the fight.
Oh gosh, I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember him right now.
Yeah, I do too. Boy, it's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Don Keeper, guy, junior welterweight.
You know who I mean? Yeah. Anyway, there was about 5 or 6 knockdowns in that fight, wasn't there, in the first 3 rounds?
Yes.
They kept knocking each other down. Now,
Amir Imam, that's his name, Amir Imam.
Yeah.
So if that was held in Britain, that fight probably would have got stopped in the first round, or possibly early in the second round, and we wouldn't have seen such a great fight and possibly a comeback and all that sort of stuff that was going on. And it's a difficult one, but I think they just need to let it go a little bit further. If Rose was knocked down in that fight, fair enough, and stop it. But anyway, let's leave that one because they're both crap anyway.
Let's move on to the news. Like I said, not really much happening in really the past month, and this was only kind of quasi-significant about that happened this past weekend. So let's move on to the news. A lot of news that's been happening. I'll go back to you, Boxing Addict, since this news again is regarding a fight on your neck of the woods. Billy Joe Saunders, who recently late last year, defeated Chris Eubank Jr. Initially he was set to fight the winner of Andy Lee and Korobov. Then we had word that he was given an opportunity to fight for the vacant IBF Middleweight title. When news came down the pipe that he's turned that opportunity down to seek the winner of WBO Middleweight title fight between champion Andy Lee and challenger Peter Quillin. Uh, the talk over in the UK, I personally think this is a pretty smart move, particularly if somehow Lee defeats Peter Quillin. I think that Saunders could beat him easier than he could beat N'Dam, for instance, who's the mandatory challenger for the IBF. The discussion, and then I'll go to you on this one, Sean. You follow up. The discussion on Saunders' move to turn down the opportunity to fight for, to turn down the opportunity for the IBF belt to seek the winner of Andy Lee and Peter Quillin.
I think it's a great move, actually. You know, he's being paid some money to step aside, isn't he? And whoever comes out of that Lee Quillin fight, you know, will have a big fight with Saunders, and especially if it's Lee, of course, which would be a massive fight in Ireland, probably. Or Saunders would go over to the States and fight Quillin, which would be another big fight. So, you know, a lot of Brits would go over for that one and stuff. So, yeah, you can't blame him for taking some step aside money, because they're all much of a muchness, those guys, aren't they? So I don't think it matters who Saunders fights, really. He's got as good a chance against any of them he decides to fight. So yeah, it's interesting. There's going to be a good little round robin of fights between those lots. So yeah.
Your thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you're taking easy money to step aside, and I think it's better to wait for the winner of Lee Quillin, because that's going to be a bigger fight, bigger to get his name out there. I mean, more money. So for him financially, I think it's a smart way to go. Fighting N'Dam for another belt. N'Dam is not such a big name. I mean, you beat him, and I don't think it really helps his stock as much. And it's also a tough fight as well. I mean, styles. I mean, they're both boxers. But fighting Lee, I don't think Lee's going to win. But I mean, even if you fight Quillin in Brooklyn, I mean, it's a great fight for him.
Yeah, I agree. I go to you on this one again. I think it's just smart. From a monetary sense, he's going to take 6 figures or whatever to step aside, let Lee and Quillin fight, and then he'll probably make another 6 figures or so to fight the winner. Just whether he beats him, say Quillin wins, whether he can beat a Quillin or not is really, you know, it's important. But the fact, just from a money perspective, I'll give Saunders credit for this one. A smart move on his part. I don't think he will beat Quillin. I think he can beat Andy Lee. But again, from a monetary perspective, I can't be mad at him for this.
Absolutely not. I mean, this is their job, and you work to make money. That's what it's about. Whether or not it entertains the rest of us is a side category. And what this also has the benefit of doing among this level of middleweights is letting them all exhaust each other and exhaust all the possible paydays before one of them has to go up against Golovkin and get laid flat, and then they're done. So they can all build their own little resumes among each other, and eventually one will be left standing, and it might be Saunders, it might be Lee. I don't think it's going to be Quillin, actually. And then somebody is going to finally have to face the music, unless it takes so long that by then Golovkin's exhausted everybody else in the division and has moved up. And they might be able to wait him out, because he may move up to 168, you know, given the lack of real opportunities in his own division. At this point, everyone that could fight him is finding every way they can to wiggle out of it. So, you know, eventually he's going to have to move up, I think, to 168, and everyone's going to want to see him fight Andre Ward once Ward has had a tune-up fight or two. So these guys, you know, they could sit down and play cards together for a while and see who gets up from the table. Why not?
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, because this is involving, I mentioned the IBF Middleweight belt, which Saunders turned down an opportunity to fight for that vacant belt. The mandatory challenger, as I said before, was Hassan N'Dam of France. He earned an opportunity by defeating Curtis Stevens last year on ESPN2, excuse me. Well, a bit of a drama about who's going to fight N'Dam for that vacant belt. But on Tuesday, we found out that David Lemieux has accepted the opportunity to fight N'Dam for that belt. The fight looks like it's going to happen in April. Don't know where yet exactly. I look at this, I think it's a smart move by Lemieux. While Lemieux is vulnerable, he doesn't have the greatest chin in the world. Neither does N'Dam. We all know how hard Lemieux can punch. I look at this about, look, Triple G is the big name, but N'Dam, Lemieux may be the most exciting fight out there at middleweight. I love this potential matchup.
Well, and I'll tell you who else loves that matchup is HBO. HBO is grooming Lemieux, and they want to get him some more airtime in front of the fans so that they get invested in him depending on the outcome and depending on what other matchups they can make for him. And everyone else's dance card is full, so why not? Great. It was a great idea, and you know, and Dom can be surprisingly competitive. You know, a lot of people thought he beat Quillin, so it could be a good fight, depending on what he's got left in the tank.
To Gail's point, Sean, the thing about N'Dam, he's tall, he's long, and he's tall, he's long, he can move, and he has a good jab. We can go in as the fight comes closer. We can talk more and more about the fight. But in looking at it, N'Dam, he could certainly give Lemieux trouble. N'Dam has a little bit of pop himself, but again, exciting fight. Have you heard about a particular date, venue for this fight? I'm hearing April, but I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure the location. Have you been hearing anything?
I haven't seen anything specific, but I mean, I haven't been looking either. I was just happy to see that these good fights are happening, which are good for the 160 weight down the road. It's nice to see, you know, other fights happening so that there's opponents for GGG down the line. You know, with all the people talking about him not fighting any top guys, if these guys like fight each other and build themselves, then it just leads to better fights down the road.
Quickly, Attic, your thoughts on Lemieux accepting the challenge to fight N'Dam for the vacant IBF belt?
Yeah, really good fight, and Dom's very slick. I like N'Dam a lot. I think N'Dam could beat him. You know, Lemieux is, we've talked about him before, he marauds forward and throws these big shots and can beat a lot of people who are on a certain level, but N'Dam's very slick, and I'd favour him in that one, to be honest.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Let's move on. Nonito Donaire, coming off being destroyed by the Axeman Nicholas Walters last October, I believe it was, is moving back down to 122 pounds. I'll go to you on this one, Gail. You was at the Donaire bout with Walters. 122 is where really Donaire came to fame, at 122 and at 118, really. But that's 122 is the same division where he suffered his biggest loss to Rigondeaux 2 years ago now, back in 2013. I know there's talk. I know people from the Donaire's camp think that Donaire, the move down to 122, can help him. He won't have to cope with the size of the junior featherweights. He can gain his spark back. But my big question is, following the bout, even going into the bout with Walters, he talked about that he had trained as hard as he has ever trained in his life. I wonder if the spark has gone from Donaire. I wonder if the mojo is gone. I think that Donaire, he's happy. He's at peace. He's happily married and whatnot. He's made money. The ones moved down to junior featherweight, it may sound good, but I wonder at this point, he may have one foot out the door. Your thoughts?
You do have to wonder. That was an absolutely horrible performance against Walters. And, you know, no disrespect to Walters. He won the fight. He won the fight, but Donaire helped him. It was a terrible performance, just start to finish. A shockingly terrible performance, especially given the lead-up of him talking how great he felt, how hard he'd trained. Nobody questions the man's work ethic. Nobody questions his dedication. But you're right. happy. There are very few guys who do well, who excel when they're happy and comfortable in this
Particularly
sport.
in this sport, yeah.
They need to be a little hungry. They need to be angry. They need to have a prize up there in front of them. Somewhere up here, something they're reaching for. And I don't know that Donaire has anything to reach for. Sometimes a boxer can be too smart, too well-rounded, too content in their life for their own good. There are a lot of other things that he can do in the sport outside the ring, and should he choose to end his career inside the ring, he's the kind of presence we need in boxing. He's smart, he's principled, whether he wants to be a trainer, whether he wants to be a promoter, whether he wants to be a commentator. I'd like to see him remain in the sport. 122 was the only option left to him if he wanted to continue. Absolutely the only option and the best option. So was that fight enough to make him hit and bounce off rock bottom again, to light the fire back up in him? Sometimes when the pilot light goes out, it's out. We're going to find out.
Sean, Nonito Donaire, can you find a fire back?
That for sure, he needs to win and win big. A victory alone on paper will not be enough. So he's got to win and win big.
Yeah, there's some further details. This bout is happening, I believe, in his home country, the Philippines, late March. I want to say March the 28th, Sean. Nonito Donaire, can he find the fire back, as Gail put it in? Can he find the fire back at 122, or has the pilot light already gone out on his career?
I think at this point, he's making money. I don't think he has the hunger anymore. And that's been pretty apparent even prior to the Rigo fight. So, he still has some talent and some pop. So hopefully he can still have a few good fights down the road. But I think the best is obviously behind him. But you never know. Sometimes a guy can turn it around and re-energize and find that extra gear. So we will see. His next fight, it's not a top quality guy, mostly just sort of build his confidence and then lead into something else. So we will see what he looks like. I hope that he has something left.
I hope so too, because look, Donaire, I have always had questions about Donaire, but you can't knock his talent. You can't knock his outright ability. I've always thought that Donaire, even at his very best, he could have done more. And also, real talk, I also thought that he was just a bigger guy, taking advantage of smaller guys, particularly when he was at 118 pounds and 115, 112 and whatnot. But he's Donaire. He's good for the sport. He's an honest guy. He's a good fighter. He has skill. He has pop, and he's tough. And he's good behind the mic. I'll go to you on this one, Alex. So overall, he's good for the sport. But I'm going to ask you, just like I asked Gail and Sean, does Nonito Donaire have it anymore? The inside, the intangibles, to be a really good to great fighter again, or is it basically all done? Is he all done?
It's hard to say whether he's all done. I don't think he's all done. He can probably beat the majority of guys out there, but you've got to see that he's fought. I think he's fought Rigondeaux and Walters in his last two fights, hasn't he? So who did he fight? Walters and
Bendeca.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Walters and Bendeca.
Sorry. Yeah. And Kay Walters is the top man in that division now, isn't he? And he looks pretty damn good. He's lost pretty badly to him, but he did okay in the first few rounds. He was giving it a bit of a go. He still looked like he had a bit of pop in him, but he got caught and he got finished off. So I don't know. It's one of those things. Boxers tend to stay on longer than they should, don't they? Which is always a problem. When do they actually turn around and hang them up? The same could be said with maybe Koto and Froch and a few others who are around at the moment. Um, I'd, yeah, I mean, let's see him out there again. Let's see if he's still got something in him. I'm not sure about going to 122 and what he can do at that weight, who he can fight now. Did you say he might have a fight lined up?
He's fighting Prado, William Prado.
Right. Okay. So I don't know too much about that guy. Is that a kind of warm-up fight or?
No. You check Prado's resume. He doesn't bring much to the ring. This fight is basically a fight in Donaire's home country to kind of restore him a bit, to make him look good, so he can look good, to put his name back out there following that devastating loss. But to Donaire's point, the move back to 122. Here's the thing. He can move back there. He can win some fights. But there's always that dangling carrot in the room. Not carrot, but there's always that man hovering above the division by the name of Guillermo Rigondeaux, who not only beat him, but as far as I'm concerned, pretty much shut him out. He always has that hovering over him. And at this point, given how he looked in his last fight, I don't see him beating a Carl Frampton.
No, this is it.
I don't see him beating what's the other fighter in that division they're talking about fighting Frampton? Scott Quigg. I don't see him beating him either. So.
But he will get a fight maybe against Santa Cruz.
Well, he's
the same Santa Cruz who's been, as far as I'm concerned, ducking Rigondeaux. Okay.
You know, I'm just checking. Donaire's last fight in the Philippines was 6 years ago, and then before that, it was right at the beginning of his career, which is now 14 years ago that he started fighting. Almost 15 now. So this is a little victory lap for his fans in the Philippines. I mean, when you're fighting in the Mall of Asia arena, you know, you're not exactly at the top venues in the world. This is his test to see what he's got in front of a friendly fan base, and whether we see him again on these shores, you know, we'll see after it's March 28th. And make no mistake, you know, he's fighting on a night that looks like it's going to end up being pretty busy, with fights in a variety of other venues. So, you know, if he doesn't do well, you know, if it wasn't for YouTube, none of us will ever see it. So
yeah, just be under the radar if he loses. Yeah.
And only the hardcore will go and check it out. So it's virtually an anonymous fight for a few bucks to see where he stands.
Right. Kind of big news outside the ring. I'll go to this, Miguel, since you have an eye. You kind of tapped in on the promotional, managerial side, if you will, business side. CBS has decided to pick up Al Haymon's Premier Boxing Champions deal. From what you're hearing, give me and some of the folks who may be listening later, either tonight, watching tonight, or listening later on the podcast, give some insight about that deal.
Well, a couple of the Premier Boxing Champions fights that Al Haymon is brokering. He's not the promoter, mind you. He's not a promoter. He has to work with promoters to get his fights made. But he's got that huge stable of talent, and the networks are, you know, remember that CBS is the parent company of Showtime, and CBS would like to see more talent coming up to fill the shoes when Floyd Mayweather's contract is up. Showtime wants to have enough talent with enough of a fan base to continue their programming there on premium cable and the occasional pay-per-view. CBS is the farm team. This is the farm team for Showtime. They're going to test some folks out on Saturday afternoons. These fights are all going to go down at 4:30 Eastern Time, 1:30 Pacific. You know, otherwise they'd be showing golf. I mean, what the hell do they care? This is practically unused airtime, and it hurts them not one single bit to hand it over to Al Haymon to program and see who they can develop. You know, let's see if some kind of superstar emerges. Let's expose some of our, you know, farm team type fighters to the public for free, and perhaps some non-fans, while they're channel surfing, looking for something to watch, some kind of sports to watch, come across these broadcasts, give it a try, and if they stick, if a few stick with it, they've done their job. It's an interesting concept, and I think it's got a lot of promise.
That noise you hear in the background.
So do my dogs.
That noise you hear in the background, don't worry about it. That's just Gail's dogs. And Haymon has received a lot of criticism, but I'm not mad at this move. Look, I've always wanted, one of my big complaints is boxing, bringing boxing back to network television. He's doing that. The NBC deal, the CBS deal, and in his first card, he's bringing some decent fights there. Adonis Stevenson, his first card, he's going to be fighting Saki Obika. Opportunity for Stevenson to look good. On the undercard of that, Artur Bertabia, excuse me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. He's a fast rising light heavyweight prospect. He's going to be fighting Gabriel Campillo in a pretty, as far as I'm concerned, pretty competitive bout. Later on, that bout is going to be on April the 4th. Second card is going to be on May the 9th, as Omar Figueroa is going to be fighting Ricky Burns. So again, boxing back on network television. I'm not mad at that one bit. This is what I've been wanting for the longest. I think that's one of the big problems with boxing. Sean, boxing addict, your thoughts on this move by Al Haymon?
I'll leave that one to you guys because I don't know a great deal about the networks and what's happening with Al Haymon at the moment, to be honest.
Short term, I think it's great for boxing. Exposure, right? Exposure is always good. Long term, I wonder how him creating monopoly is going to be long term for boxing. I mean, for him, obviously, it's going to be good because financially he's going to make out quite well. But I wonder long term, how is it going to benefit the fans and the fighters? People were all very hyped about Haymon early on with Showtime with the great competitive matches he put on. And then the year later, he put on nothing but crappy fights just to protect his fighters and to give them big cash for little risk. So now, of course, he's coming out. And if you look at these fights, I mean, the names look good, but a lot of the fights aren't really that competitive. I mean, I don't think Thurman Guerrero is competitive. I don't think Molina Broner is competitive. And a lot of the other fights, Berbabidev against Campillo. Campillo won against a good young fighter his last outing, and he's a good boxer, but he has no chin. So, I mean, after 3 rounds of outboxing the guy and exposing him as being limited, he's going to get KO'd. So it's going to help always the marquee name fighters. So we will see.
Here's the thing. If done right, maybe the fights are not that competitive in your estimation, but he can promote a fighter. He can put Stevenson's name, put him on the map. He can put him on the map. Put Omar Figueroa, who will be fighting in May against Ricky Burns, former champ. He can put him on the map, up their profile, and make them a bigger fighter, make them a TV attraction, make them television attraction, and maybe attract more fans in that way, promoting not necessarily the fights itself, but maybe the fighters.
Well, that's exactly what I think he's doing. He's trying to build his stable of fighters. And I mean, I don't know what that's going to do with the rest of the world, with all the other fighters outside that aren't affiliated with Al Haymon, who are going to get locked out, closed off. And I mean, eventually everyone's going to have to sign with him. And then what's the quality of fights we're going to get? Is he just going to have guys protecting themselves, building up their records so that on national TV they look good, but then not really putting them in against the guys that they should be fighting?
Yeah, one thing I'd say from looking at it from the outside is, the fights that you've mentioned there, it just looks like, okay, he's bringing these guys over like Burns and Beaker, ex-champions who are way past their best, to keep their fighters going and keep winning. And how competitive will these fights be? I don't know. It's good that it's going to be on terrestrial television. I'm taking it, so you guys will see it for free, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's always a good thing. I think that's really good. Like the Frampton fight is on is on ITV here, first time for years and years that they've had boxing. That's next week, and it's really good actually.
Yeah, this will be the first time in you could almost say decades since boxing has been on terrestrial TV in the United States. It's interesting. There's a very specific distinction between the deal Al Haymon has cut with NBC Universal and their networks versus what he's done with CBS Showtime. CBS Showtime is a straight promoter or a straight producer deal. He still has to work with the promoter. He's not the promoter, so somebody has to play ball with him. You know, and he can't continue to always rely on the, you know, DeBella and K2 and Goosen. You know, eventually he's going to have to play ball with Top Rank and Golden Boy, who, you know, have seemed to mend their disagreement and are playing nice with each other. That's the CBS deal. With NBC, what he's done is what has been done in radio for a long time, where people outright buy the entire program time. You don't just buy some commercials. You don't just buy 3 or 4 minutes worth of commercials. If it's an hour-long program, you buy the whole hour. If it's a 3-hour program, you buy the whole 3 hours. You see people do that on a local level, and they're called infomercials. You know, you sell your stuff. People do it in radio, and they'll program a show about gardening or home improvement or Ask the Doctor. Well, these are brokered time deals, and Al Haymon owns that programming time. It is then up to him to put on the best possible programming. He's responsible for making it happen, you know, getting the announcers there, finding the venues, hiring the personnel, all that stuff in conjunction with the network. He may or may not have, you know, the deal of completely being responsible for selling all the commercial time, but the way it traditionally works is if you own that whole hour, you're also responsible for selling the commercials. So he would be the guy going out, getting the sponsors, selling the airtime. Sometimes there's a split with whoever the network is, and then they work out sort of a bridge selling deal. But this puts Al Haymon in the television production business, which is a very interesting concept. And when the networks have nothing better, you know, they're not getting huge whopping ratings for Saturday night programming. You know, that is sort of the TV show graveyard. You know, that's where they show reruns of the very popular series that aired earlier in the week to let people catch up, because, you know, it's either that or they put up a, you know, a test signal, and it's not going to be a whole lot different for them. So there's nothing but an upside for them for the potential of a real audience out there for this. Saturday night's a given. Saturday afternoon, a given. And if this can then help develop bigger names for bigger paydays for everybody, everybody rides. But he's going to find out pretty quick, you know, once the novelty wears off. You know, right now, Guerrero Thurman, we're all just so damn curious how this is going to look on a brand new network at a new time. We're all going to watch. A year from now, Guerrero Thurman kind of fights aren't going to cut it. So once the novelty is worn off, that's when we're really going to find out how this is going to work. And I give it 6 months before we really find out. Once we get into the heavy-duty fall 2015 boxing season, when we see, you know, the traditionally high-quality fight stage, let's see what Mr. Haymon has to show us then.
Yeah, and also you have to keep in mind once fall hits, how is he going to compete with college football, especially?
He's going to have a lot more to compete with, absolutely. You're going to have college football, you're going to have professional football, you're going to have baseball playoffs through October for some of that time, which, you know, matter to a lot of casual sports fans. Yeah, he's going to have a lot more to compete with. Doing this late spring through the summer, well, where he has nothing to lose.
Right.
Absolutely nothing to lose, and neither do the networks.
Yeah. What
So
would
it's a
be?
very smart thing for everybody to get involved in. And make no mistake, it's all aiming at getting these guys from the so-called, double A and triple A minor leagues up to the majors, to the premium cables and the pay-per-views.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on and talk about a bit of a saga involving the Dirrell brothers. Anthony Dirrell, who had current WBC super middleweight champion, was supposed to fight, I believe it was DeGale, for that vacant belt, but the WBC gave him an extension, 4-month extension to make a title defense. He took that extension. Will fight. Me check. He's going to be defending the belt against Badou Jack. Also, Andre Dirrell, he's going to be instead fighting James DeGale for a belt as well. Was it the vacant IBF belt, I believe it is?
Yeah, there's a bit of confusion there, I think, between the Dirrells. But I believe it's Anthony Dirrell who was supposed to be fighting Groves for the WBC. And he's now got an extension and he's fighting some bullshit fight with
Yeah,
Badou Jack.
Anthony Dirrell. He's supposed to fight Groves, giving him the extension to fighting Badou Jack, defending that belt. And Andre Dirrell, he's going to end up fighting DeGale for the vacant IBF super middleweight belt. I'll go to you on this one, Sean. Kind of the saga, if you will, about the Dirrell brothers and who they're fighting. Your thoughts on, first of all, on Anthony Dirrell getting an extension and fighting Badou Jack, and kind of his brother stepping in and fighting DeGale, who was going to fight Anthony, the younger brother. All that surrounding the Dirrell brothers. Your thoughts on it?
As far as getting the extension, I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, if a guy wants a tune-up fight just so he's sharp before he goes in there against the top-level guy, I can understand that. I mean, I won't hold that against him because, I mean, I give other guys the pass for the same thing. And, hopefully after this he will follow it up with a quality fight. And then, in hindsight, we'll see it for what it was, and it won't be really such a big deal. And as far as his brother finally coming back into boxing and getting back to where he was before, getting KO'd by Arthur Abram, it's good to see him in there against a
cheap shot.
top-level
It was a cheap shot. Let's just put it out there.
Yeah. But he won the fight. But it's nice to see him finally getting up there to top-level fighters. I mean, I've seen a lot of hype about him, but I mean, since then he hasn't fought anybody really top 10 level. So now he's going in there against a guy to win a belt, which is what he wanted. 2 skilled fighters. I mean, it's going to be a good fight. This is a 50-50 fight. So, maybe he should have been the guy that looked for a tune-up fight before this fight. Because I think I have DeGale beating him.
I think it's a pick 'em. I think Dirrell can actually win. But I'll go to you on this one, Boxing Addict, because all of this really surrounds James DeGale, who wanted to fight with Carl Froch, didn't get it, was supposed to fight Anthony Dirrell for the vacant WBC belt. He didn't get it. He's fighting finally Andre Dirrell for the IBF belt. The talk of DeGale, I like him as a fighter. He fought George Groves, lost by close decision. I think he's improved greatly since then. I thought personally he had an opportunity if he was to fight Froch. I think he had a good chance to beat Carl Froch. But instead he's going to be fighting Andre for the vacant belt, IBF belt. The thoughts on DeGale and the thoughts on this upcoming fight against Andre. I'm with Sean on this one and saying this is a 50-50 fight to me. It could be real exciting, but then again, given the fact that both guys are skilled, both guys are really boxers, it could be boring. It could turn out to be a stink fest.
Yeah, I feel kind of sorry for DeGale really because he's been waiting around so long to get his shot. But yeah, is Dirrell actually going to come over? He's not signed yet. He doesn't want to come over. So whether that fight actually happens, I don't know. if it does, it'll be a very good fight. It's a really hard fight to pick because, like Sean was saying, Andre hasn't really done anything in the last few years. He's barely fought guys out of the top 30 or 40, I think. So has he still got it? I think he still has got it. He's been looking pretty good. The Gale has improved. I think he's improved way past Groves. I think that's why Groves avoided the fight with the Gale as well, because Eddie Hearn was trying to get that sorted. The vacant IBF belt and pay Direll off.
Excuse me, Attic. Let me interrupt you. Sorry for interrupting. What was Groves thinking that a fight with the Gale is kind of a step down for him? He looks down at Groves.
Yeah.
What was on his mind? That was kind of a stupid comment to me.
He's deluded, Groves. Unfortunately,
get some insight on what exactly he said, because that left me shaking my head. I mean, really, man, really.
There was a little bit of a Twitter war, and I think Eddie Hearn had said, let's get the fight on with the Gale, because it would be massive over here. It'd be pay-per-view, 20,000 in the O2 Arena, probably more in a stadium somewhere else. And Groves has given it the big one, thinking he's above the Gale, and he turned around and said to Eddie Hearn in a tweet something along the lines of, he said something about, is daddy going to pay for this, or something like that, which is a comment about Eddie Hearn's dad, the promoter, because he calls Eddie Hearn, daddy's boy, got everything laid on a plate and all that stuff. So there's a bit of that going on. But Groves basically thinks that he's a level above the Gale and he should be earning the bigger percentage of a deal if they were to fight, which is rubbish, really. You've just been knocked out twice and you've looked terrible in your last 2 fights. He's waiting on Direll. He seems to think that he could beat Anthony Direll, and he's waiting on that fight. I don't think he thinks he can beat the Gale now, which is why he's not taking it personally. Because the titles probably mean a lot to both of them. I'll give them that. But when you're talking about Groves fighting Direll for probably something along the lines of, it could be $150,000, he could earn probably $2 million fighting the Gale. And surely that's what it comes down to, He didn't want the fight, and that tells you a lot.
Your thoughts, Gail, on these 2 fights?
Well, I think that we're, from what I'm reading, I'm seeing Direll say that he would be willing to fight in the UK, and that's by far the bigger fight. Direll Gale here is sort of a shoulder shrug fight, especially at the time frame they're looking to do it. It's much better money for both of them to do it in the UK. So, be smart of Direll. I mean, he can talk all he wants about, I'm going back to where I, got a raw deal before and the judges were against me, but, I'll be the bigger man and I'll go do the fight. And if he positions himself that way, I think he'll suck it up and do it, because it is going to be a better venue for him, and he's just going to have to make sure in his mind that he doesn't let it go to the judges. I mean, that's the bottom line. As far as Anthony turning down the fight, and wanting something more of a tune-up, what I really object to is when guys don't get in the ring at all. So as long as he's getting in there against anyone legitimate in the division, we can question the reasons, but we can say, well, if it had been up to me, or I was the manager, I was the promoter, that's not what I would do. But the bottom line to me is, as long as they keep getting in the ring, we have seen some really strange things happen in lopsided matches before. I'm not saying I think that's going to happen with him, not now, but as long as they're getting in the ring, there is always the possibility anything can happen, unless it's Rod Salka. There are exceptions, right? And on a future show, we should talk about the implosion of Danny Garcia, but that's for another time.
There is also one thing happening here, which is everybody is chasing Froch and the Froch money. Even Andre Dirrell's been piping up recently. Because if Dirrell beats DeGale, he'll be calling out Froch. If DeGale beats Dirrell, he'll be calling out Froch. If Groves beats Dirrell, Groves will be at it again. They're all wanting this big money fight with Froch, and I think they're all kind of avoiding each other at the moment. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
The one that's calling out Froch is Golovkin, and Froch has been honest enough to say, nah, I don't think so.
Everyone is. Hopkins has been at it as well. They're all at it.
That's true. That's true. Now that's a very interesting proposition to me.
Yeah.
I think he be mowed down, but that'd be fun. That'd be something I'd pay to see.
I'd certainly, what would be most interesting about the fight would be the build-up.
Exactly.
That would be brilliant. I think the fight could be a bit of a washout, unfortunately, but as Hopkins fights sometimes are. But having said that, he'd be coming to Nottingham, I believe, so that would certainly be interesting.
Exactly, and that'd be brilliant for Hopkins. That gets him in front of a big audience, very curious about him. I think he'd have a field day with the British media. That's the kind of stuff we live for as fans. We really do. And it'd fill anywhere they chose to stage it.
Yeah.
Right. The actual fight would be anticlimactic compared to the build-up.
Yeah, well, they're going to hold it at Nottingham Forest City Ground, which is the football stadium here. It holds about 35,000. And the atmosphere there would be incredible if Hopkins came over. But, Froch doesn't get much credit for beating Hopkins at this stage, unfortunately, so I can't see it happening, I don't think. But,
one more news item added before we go to the news, to the previews, excuse me, and start closing things down. News broke that Evgeny Gradovich, IBF Featherweight champion, is going to be fighting his mandatory Lee Selby April 25th at the O2 Arena in London. I'm interested in this fight. First of all, I'm a little bit surprised that they put up the money to bring Gradovich over to the UK, to London specifically. Second of all, I'm looking at this fight. Am I wrong here in thinking that I think that Selby is not a great puncher, but he's a heck of a boxer as far as I'm concerned. I think Selby beats Gradovich. I'm going to make the prediction right now.
Yeah, I'd go with that as well. I don't think Gradovich is great personally. He's okay, and I think he's beatable, certainly by a good boxer like Selby. He doesn't have a lot of power. Having said that, he did knock out Brunker in his last fight, which was a bit of a surprise. Brunker was the unbeaten Australian guy who came over, and it was supposed to be a bit of 50-50, but Selby totally outboxed him and knocked him out. So maybe he's getting a bit more power now, I don't know. But yeah, Eddie Hearn and Sky have got a lot of money to bring these fights to Britain now. They can pay the fighters well to come over here. I was just sort of joking in the chat earlier about, Eddie Hearn will probably wait till Donaire's broken down a little bit more and they'll bring him over for Quigg. Because they can afford to do it nowadays, They've got the money.
At this point, I think it doesn't matter with Donaire, Quigg, Frampton. For what I've seen of Donaire lately, the Walters win, even the win against Redieka, both of them, Quigg and Frampton, I believe, beats him. So it wouldn't really matter.
And that's my point. Eddie Hearn and Sky have got the money to bring these big names over, so they'll come over for the money,
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on and do a preview of what's happening this weekend. I'll go to you on this one, Sean. The big bout, of course, happening in Monte Carlo on Saturday. Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, defending his WBA middleweight belt against Martin Murray, who I like as a fighter. I thought he beat Sergio Martinez. I definitely thought he beat Felix Sturm when they fought. But Murray's the big underdog going in. I made the mistake of thinking that Rubio would give Triple G a decent go. Their last fight when, quite frankly, Rubio, I still don't understand what he did getting up. I thought he could have got up, but he just didn't. He quit on me as far as I'm concerned. I don't see that with Murray. Murray's a big middleweight. He's a strong middleweight. Decent skills. I'm going to say it just like I thought Rubio would give him a decent chance, decent shot. I'm going to say that Martin Murray will give him a decent fight in this Saturday night. I don't think he will beat him, but I think he will take Gennady Golovkin some rounds here.
Yeah, I mean, unlike all the haters out there that are asking GGG to step up to 168 to fight an inactive Ward, I mean, I think he's been staying busy fighting quality fighters. I mean, it's easy to criticize guys when he plows through them, but I mean, is that a reflection on the guys being bums, or is that a reflection on him being a great fighter with power who knows what he's doing and is just doing what he's doing? I mean, nobody expected Rubio to go down with a punch to the top of the head. I mean, let's be real. I mean, because he took punches through early part of the fight. I mean, solid punches, and he connected on solid punches as well. So early on, it looked like it would be back and forth competitive fight. And Rubio is a big power puncher, and he showed that he could take a beating and get up and then end up stopping a guy when he beat Lemieux. Now everybody is saying, you know, they want to see GGG fight a guy who was beat by Rubio. But now that he's beat one guy, now he's the next guy in line. I mean, Murray is solid. He's never really lost a fight. The two fights he has that went against him both went to the cards, both really controversial and close, both one in Argentina, one in Germany. I mean, you know, the guy's got no gifts, let's put it that way. And now he's going into Monaco against GGG. And I mean, who would think that he's going to fold? He's never been down. He's never been stopped. He's not a big puncher, but I mean, just being a big puncher doesn't mean that you're going to be competitive against GGG. You need to have skills. You need to be able to do more than just punch. Ask Rubio, ask Stevens. So I expect it to be a competitive fight, but I do expect him to be out by round 8.
Gail, boxing addict, your assessment of the fight. Am I wrong in thinking that that Murray will take Triple G will take him some rounds here, or do you think that Triple G will do to what he's done to so many fighters in the past and basically just have his way and just originally blow him out? His power would be too much.
Would you like to go first, Gail?
I will. You know, that fight that Murray fought against Sergio Martinez in Argentina, that was a crazy-ass fight. The conditions, the weather conditions, if you recall, were wild. It was one of these hybrid outdoor arenas with a canvas tarp over as the roof. It was a rainy night. It was incredibly windy. There was talk of halting the fight, putting it off and postponing it due to the weather. Rain was blowing sideways. For a while it was blowing on into the ring. They managed to hold it off barely to get the fight done.
And if you remember, HBO, they was going to air it on delay, but they ended up airing it live because of the bad weather conditions.
Right. It was really touch and go whether that fight was going to happen. I mean, you have to really be concerned about the safety of the fighters in windy, wet conditions like that. So, you know, but everybody's there. They managed to get it going. And Murray pushed Martinez around that ring. He doesn't, however, have the kind of power. He didn't have the kind of power to seal the deal. So it did go to the cards. You're in Argentina. And once again, here we are talking about somebody feeling that they got the short end of the stick from the judges. Well, the way you prevent that is not letting it go to the judges. So one thing we know about Murray, he's tough. He can definitely take a punch, and that is key when you fight Golovkin. No glass chins need apply. So he doesn't have that. But has he ever faced a guy that's not only a power puncher but a wickedly good body puncher like Golovkin? That's where he does a tremendous amount of his damage, is in the setup. Nobody body punches like this guy. it's crazy making stuff. And by the time that he does, land what looks like the knockout punch, well, which technically is the knockout punch, he has built the rock solid foundation with his work to the body. And so when he hits a guy like Rubio from the left at a crazy angle, across the top of the head, he doesn't really need to hit him that hard to make him go down because he's already damaged goods. That's what's going to happen to Murray. But I do think it's going to take longer than usual. I don't think we're going to see a second-round knockout. I don't think we're going to see a fourth-round knockout. I think we're going to see a seventh or eighth round TKO stoppage. And I think Murray will look as good as anyone has. But over and over, we keep saying the same thing. Oh, Curtis Stevens is going to really provide he's going to be a test. Oh, Daniel Geale, he's going to be a test. Marco Antonio Rubio, he's going to be a test. We haven't seen it happen yet. I think Murray will edge a tiny bit closer. It is certainly going to last longer than the last fight did, but it's not going the distance. Not this time. Yeah, I just don't see it. And this is practically a hometown crowd for Golovkin. They love him in Monte Carlo. And, it's a fairly short card. There's only 4 fights on the card. He's the guy they've all come to see. And it'll be, he will be welcomed like he's a member of the royal family in Monte Carlo. And, he and the prince will be standing there in the ring at the end.
I agree with you somewhat, Gail. I think that Murray will take him some rounds. I think he will win some early rounds, but eventually Golovkin with the power, with the body punching, as you mentioned before. And I think Golovkin's a better boxer, technical fighter than a lot of people give him credit for. That will play a role. I think he will slowly but surely wear down Murray, take him out. I'm saying between 8 and 10 rounds, with Golovkin end up stopping him. Your thoughts on this fight, Adam?
Well, you're all wrong, obviously.
Wouldn't be the first
time. Murray's going to win, isn't he? No, it's a tricky one. I think Murray is the best fighter. I know we've said it before, when he's fought these guys, but I didn't think much of Stevens. I didn't think much of Macklin fighting him. Murray is a different cup of tea, as we say. He's tough. He's got that European style as well, as we used to call it, with the hands up. He's got a very good guard. He's got a good stiff jab on him. And I don't think he's going to be one of these guys who allows Golovkin to push him back so much and dance around the ring and chase him and eventually get to him. I think he's going to give him a lot more than he's sort of bargained for. And I think Golovkin knows that, actually. You've got to think, you made a good point about in Argentina with Chavez, that fight for Murray. Murray wasn't a big name in Britain then. He still really isn't now. But he certainly wasn't when he went out to fight Chavez. And that Chavez fight was 40 or 50,000 Argentinians there. And there is the Argentinian and English thing is very intense because of the Falklands War back in the 80s. And Murray was getting spat on into the ring. He was getting things thrown at him. He was under a lot of intense pressure. And he went in there and beat Martinez, in my opinion. And
he absolutely did beat Sergio, no question
about it.
Yeah,
I think he did. And he also did pretty much the same to Sturm out in Germany with a packed German audience against him. So he's been under a lot of intense pressure. And I think he's going into this fight with a lot more confidence than some of the other guys have previously. So I'm going for a Golovkin knockout, probably about the 8th or 9th round, but I wouldn't be surprised if Murray was the first man to take in 12 rounds.
Which in itself would be a big victory.
It would be a big victory.
It would be a moral victory for sure. I have to read this to all y'all if you haven't seen it. It's the headline in The Guardian from boxing columnist Kevin Mitchell. Have you seen this? Martin Murray's only hope of beating Gennady Golovkin is with a bazooka.
Who said that?
Kevin Mitchell.
The lightweight Kevin Mitchell, who just won recently.
The Guardian.
Wow.
That's a little harsh. Yeah, it's a little harsh.
It is. Well, just touching on Mitchell, he looked mighty fine in his performance the other day. That was, I don't know if you saw it, but wow, I was buzzing off that because that was the Mitchell that we know from years ago. It was an immaculate performance, battered him.
Yeah, indeed.
It was.
Yeah, but skillful, immensely skillful. And if he goes in there and fights Linares like that, it'll beat him up. It'll beat him easily.
I wouldn't go about that because, well, you know, the thing about Linares is Linares is chinny. We know that. He cuts easily. But the thing about Jorge Linares, he is a heck of a skill fighter. With Crawford leaving the division, I will argue he is the most skilled fighter in that division right now. He can, and he's fast. And he's fast. I mean, look, he lost to DeMarco. DeMarco wore him down, but early on he was outboxing DeMarco's shoes off. He really was. He is a very, very talented fighter. Again, it's just how much can he take? That's always been the issue with DeMarco. I mean, with Linares, but his talent is right up there with not just anybody with the lightweight division. He has as much talent as just about anybody in the sport. Just really? on pure talent and skill, he's as talented and skilled as anybody. The problem is he can barely take a punch.
Well, I need to go back and watch some more of his fights then, because the couple of fights that I've seen of him, he's looked good, but he hasn't looked as good as Mitchell in that fight. No way.
Yeah, watch early on the first half of that Antonio DeMarco bout. He was putting on an exhibition in that bout. Speed, skill. DeMarco couldn't do nothing with him. He just eventually wore down. And DeMarco caught up to him and wore him out and cut him up and just took him out.
Right. Okay, I'll check that out then. But it looks like they're going to try and get him over to Britain, so that will be a good fight either way.
I wouldn't be mad at that. Let's move on the undercard of Golovkin Murray. Fighter we've mentioned early on in the pound-for-pound box report, maybe 2 years ago. Guy by the name of Haggy Butler, WBA strawweight champion. Normally I wouldn't mention this fight, but again, I'm a boxing geek, so I know about fighters like this. Promoted by Rodney Berman out in South Africa. Looks to be the main fighter right now in Berman's stable. They've been building him a base really as kind of the top main attraction in South Africa. His last few bouts has been in Monte Carlo. He's going to be fighting a guy by the name of Jesus Silvestre. I don't know if Butler is the best in that division. I hadn't seen, quite honestly, enough of the other guys, the other champions specifically in that division to get a pure assessment of him, how good he is. But, you know, he's a guy out there. He's a guy that folks are focusing on, trying to make a name out of. And, again, he's becoming the darling of Berman's stable and really maybe even in South Africa, period. Silvestre, I've seen him fight. To me, he fights a bit like a poor man's Eric Morales, except not as good. He has pop. He's strong, but he's been down. He's been hurt. I shared the video with you guys. I'll go to you on this one, Gail. Your assessment, your thoughts on Haggy Butler, your thoughts on this bout Saturday night against Silvestre on the undercard of Golovkin and Murray.
It's going to be an interesting test. The vast majority of his fights have been in South Africa. His last, this will be the second in Monte Carlo, third maybe. You know, when you're fighting that limited geographic talent pool, you know, it's easier to look good and not know what the relative skill level is. You know, you can look good against that pool and then get into the bigger, you know, you're the big fish in the little pond. And he now needs these fights starting in Europe and then, you know, perhaps into Great Britain to really test what he's about. Having said that, he can be very careless. I think he loses focus. I don't think it's anything other than his own fault that he he simply isn't paying attention. But when he gets down to business, it's very impressive. And for a fighter that small, we're talking, straw weight, minimum weight, that's 105 pounds. That's my size, okay? Which kind of blows my mind. For a guy that size, he works to the body extremely well. I'm a big fan of that liver shot knockout, and he scored some nice-looking ones. But he really can't lose mental focus because he leaves himself open. Sometimes, as he did in his last fight, getting hit early like he did, and finding his backside down on the canvas, has a way of straightening up your mental focus, and I think it helped him in the last fight. If he does well this time, I think that will tell us what he's destined for. But clock's ticking on him a little bit. He's not a super young guy, so he needs to get moving. It's a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, he's in his late 20s, but so I still think there are opportunities for him to grow, to up his profile. And to your point about focus, he was in fact knocked down in his last fight against the Chinese fighter, former strawweight champion Zhang. Got knocked down in round 2 of that fight, came back and knocked Zhang down a round later. But yeah, he's a very good body puncher. Against 2 fights back against the Thai fighter Koike Jim, wore him down and originally knocked him out as a result of body shots. I'll go to you on this one, Sean. Butler came into prominence really beating Nkosi Nati Joy 2 years ago in a big fight in South Africa. Went on to move to win the world title by first down knockout. I can't remember the guy's name, but again, his last 2 fights, Koike Jim and Zhang, I believe, have been held in Monte Carlo. They're trying to up his cachet. Your thoughts on Butler? How good of a fighter do you think he is, and how do you think he will? Your prediction on his upcoming fight against Silvestre? I think this fight may go the distance. I think Silvestre, he's the underdog, but I think he will give Heke Butler a good fight here.
I think he will win. I think he'll beat the guy. But, I find he's in that unfortunate circumstance that he's a small fighter. And small fighters are just not known and not paid attention to. So, I mean, domestically in South Africa, he could probably do well for himself and become an attraction. But, I mean, outside of South Africa, internationally, I don't know what his upside truly is. I mean, people that sort of break out of that are people that have crazy power and, sort of mythical, like a Nui. 6 fights, 2 weights, big power, walking through guys. And that interests casual fans and boxing people, because you can go to YouTube and you can watch like really short clips and you can like be wowed and impressed right away. Guys like Gonzalez as well. I mean, he's not quite as exciting or dynamic as a Nui, but I mean, he still gets the job done, and it's taken him like 35 fights to sort of start to break out a little bit, and then still on some pound for pound lists, he's not even in the top 40.
Which is ridiculous. Just ridiculous. I wonder. Never mind.
I have no idea how they do it. It's supposed to be by points, but I mean,
never. I don't want to waste brain cells thinking about how folks don't have Roman Gonzalez ranked that low. That would be a waste of brain. I'm not going to waste brain cells trying to think about why.
Estrada's ranked over him, a guy who he beat. But a guy like Butler, I find that he's in that situation where he doesn't have that power. He has a lot of fights that go 12 rounds. And like Gail was saying, loses sort of interest. So, he has spots where he's really impressive, sort of, Woody Pep style-esque, boxer, mover. But I don't know if he's going to get the attraction, if he's going to, like, grab the common fan, like he would if he was, like, fighting at, say, 168.
Boxing Addict, have you seen Heke Butler? And if you have, your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I managed to see his last couple of fights because he was on the undercard of some Martin Murray fights or possibly a Golovkin fight, I don't know, but out in Monte Carlo. So he's boxed out there quite a few times. But Brian Mitchell was the guy who was introducing them at the press conference the other day, all the fighters, and he said about Brian Mitchell was the guy, the ex-South African boxer. He's the only South African boxer to go into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, I believe.
Heck of a junior lightweight back in the 80s in particular. Heck of a junior lightweight.
That's right. And so he's probably about one of the most famous they've had. And Hecky Budler, I believe, is as famous out there as he was sort of now. So he introduced him as the mini Pacquiao. 13 world title fights, IBO and WB, whatever it is, champion. And I don't know if he's a big hero out there, but it certainly made him sound like one. It's
called hyperbole boxing at it, but proceed.
Yeah, he's not got many. He's not got many knockouts on his resume, has he? He seems to go sort of 12 rounds a lot. He's won a few split decisions and majority decisions and stuff. He looked good in his last two fights. He obviously got knocked down in the last one, actually, which could have been a bit of a shock, but he came back and won it. Yeah, it's difficult at that weight, isn't it? There's nowhere for him to go, really. I don't think he's big enough to start stepping up. So he is what he is. He's probably the best around in that division. Although I know he's not. I noticed he's not ranked at number one. There's a Thai guy there who's unbeaten at the moment. I won't try and pronounce his name, but I've not managed to see him fight it. So I don't know what he's like in comparison. But it's good to see on a show like that, I suppose. See the little guys having a brawl.
Little guys.
Yeah, see the little guys have a go. And he's obviously a good little fighter and stuff, but yeah, there's not really a great deal of interest in that one, to be honest.
Well, he's fighting. He is ranked number 2. He's fighting the number 7 guy. Zhang, the Chinese fighter, was the number 8 ranked guy, so he's moving up. He is essentially has gone up and down the list. Taking out these guys. And he's going to have to fight the few top guys left in his division and then call it a day. I mean, that's the best he can do. Fighting in Monte Carlo on a Golovkin undercard, beats a lot of things you could be doing with your time.
Yes.
And let's think about it. For somebody who is 105 pounds and a man, and you want to be an athlete, there's not a whole lot of opportunities for you. I mean, if you think about it, you could be a jockey, which, be a jockey. You can wrestle, but, and I'm talking about Olympic-type wrestling. Once you get out of the amateurs, you're not going to be on a UFC card at 105 pounds. Thank God there is boxing for these guys, who can fight other guys at competitive levels in their weight class. They're never going to be at the top of the marquee, but when those are the cards Mother Nature has dealt you, he's taken it, he's run with it. Good for him. And South Africa's a little shy on athlete heroes right now, so it's a good time for him to be there.
Yeah, the sad thing is, unfortunately, the landscape vis-a-vis the mighty mites, the little guys, if you will, has changed. This isn't the 1990s where, I hate to sound nationalistic here, but there's not an American star to up the profile of these guys like they were 20 years ago when you had the Michael Carvajal's of the world, the Danny Romero's of the world, the Johnny Tapias of the world. He was, particularly Carvajal, he was the guy. He was the guy getting the big fights, making the big money, who got all of the attention because of fighting on network television, because of the work with Bob Arum, because of the fights with Chiquita Gonzalez, and I think as a result of that, particularly here in the States, particularly here in North America, there was a lot of attention paid onto him and the fighters of that ilk, be it Carvajal, be it Chiquita Gonzalez, be it Ricardo Lopez, Too Sharp Johnson, even fighters overseas like Yuri Arbachikov, the Korean fighter Myung Woo Yu, all-time great junior flyweight. I could go on and on. They got a lot of attention because mainly you had that main guy by the name of Michael Carvajal there, and as a result, all those fighters around that area, that was a golden era for flyweights, for junior flyweights, for junior bantamweights, all the way up to bantamweights with fighters like Canizales and Junior Jones and whatnot, Robert Quiroga, who had that great fight with Killer King back in '91. You just don't have that now, and because of that, there's potential there with Anui, with Roman Gonzalez, but that's only for us hardcore fans. You don't have that main American guy, and I hate to sound nationalistic, but because you don't have that guy, Hanky Butler, for instance, he's going to remain a fighter just for hardcore boxing fans, excuse me, to be watching. And even among the hardcore fans, they're not going to know who he is.
No, that's true. But you know, it's one for the fans. It's one for the fans, and you know, he's making some good money, I suppose, and he's obviously a bit of a hero in South Africa, so it's all good stuff. But yeah, on the big sort of boxing scene, it doesn't really cause many waves, does it?
And you know, this guy, I mean, come on, how many of us actually in our real lives know a guy that weighs 105 pounds, you know, who's more than 14 years old?
You can't get over this, can you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, America, especially in the U.S., you're just not going to see that. And, you know, for everything we say about Carvajal, you know, tremendous figure. You know, there's a big difference between a guy 5'3", 105 and a guy 5'5" or 5'6" and, you know, 112. I mean, that's really, you know, interesting when you think about.
Carvajal was 108. He was only 3 pounds up.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, it's a big difference. You know, it's kind of laughable when you think about, you know, a fight like we just had between a Bermain Stavern and a Deontay Wilder, where there was a legit 20-pound difference at the weigh-in. You know, who knows what it was at the time of the fight. And, you know, at those lower, you know, weight classes, once you're down that far, boy, honestly, he should just be glad to have any sort of visibility in the sport at all. And good on him.
It's interesting that you mentioned jockeys earlier, actually, because I don't know if it's the same in the US, but the jockeys in Britain, a lot of them are boxers. They have boxing tournaments in amongst them, and they all grow up kind of fighting each other in these tournaments and stuff. So there's something there with these little guys. I don't know.
That's funny. Now, boxers in the U.S., I don't think they engage in that kind of stuff. And the lion's share of really top-flight jockeys in the United States are Latino guys. They're from Panama. They're from Mexico. They're from Colombia. You know, the other place that very small guys can do really well is professional cycling. And you've got a lot of Colombian professional cyclists at the top levels of the sport. A cyclist named Nairo Quintana, who weighs, I think, a $120, you know. But hey, the less you have to haul up the side of the mountain, the better. Yeah, so that's another sport where they can do very, very well as small size.
Last bout before we shut things down, rematch between Arthur Abraham and Paul Smith. They fought last year. A lot of folks felt that Paul Smith won. I was one of them. I thought he won slightly. They're going to be fighting a rematch again Saturday in Germany, and I go to you on this one, Attic. The bout is going to be held specifically in Berlin for Abraham's WBO super middleweight title. I go to you on this one, Attic. My thing is, I assess this fight on paper. Abraham, he slowed down as far as I'm concerned. Clearly, his punch output, he doesn't throw the punches that he used to when he was younger. My problem is with him, he has bad transition from offense to defense and vice versa. He's either all offense or all defense. He doesn't know how to switch effectively between the two. And I think that's the part of him not throwing as many punches as he used to. But when I think of Smith, my concern is somebody mute their mic. My concern is that Smith, he fought the best fight of his career in that first fight with Abraham. I wonder if he can fight at that level again. And also, Smith didn't really get caught with a big punch from Abraham, and the one thing Abraham has is power. I wonder what will happen in the rematch should Abraham hit him with a big punch. I wonder how much of a chin does he have?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to weigh up, this one. Paul Smith's trainer, Paul Gallagher, has said it's going to be a blast out, and he's telling Smith to go in there and try and blast him out within 5 or 6 rounds because that's his only chance of winning. And I kind of agree with that, and I can kind of see it. I could see it happening. I think there was a couple of occasions where Smith was hurting him to the body, and he was looking tired and a little bit dodgy late on, Abraham was, and then he came back a bit, but yeah, it's one of those. I mean, if that fight was in Britain or America, I reckon Smith would have got the fight, maybe by a round. I don't know. So they're both going in with confidence that they can win the fight. Smith has absolutely nothing to lose. He's going to be taking over a couple of thousand of British fans out over from Liverpool. It's going to be a great fight. I'm looking forward to that one just as much as the Murray one, to be honest. I think it's going to be a cracking fight. And I think Smith has a legitimate chance to win. If Abraham catches him, of course he's a big puncher, and he could easily stop him as well. But I'm going with Smith. I think Smith can do it. Abraham's been in a lot of tough fights. He tends to try and get through them with his guard up, throwing the odd shot and nicking the round. But if we've got some proper judges on this one who score it for shots actually landed, I think Smith can either nick it or even stop him. I really do.
Sean, your thoughts?
I have to go with my doppelganger. I'll go with Smith. I think he's going to come into this fight a lot more confident. I mean, obviously he's confident already, but I mean, he knows he won the fight. He feels he just got screwed out of the decision because the fight was in Germany. So he's going to come in. I'm sure he trained even harder than he did, and now he knows what to expect from Abram. I mean, mind you, Abraham has been in quite a few rematches lately, and he's looked much better the second time around. So it'll be interesting to see what he brings as well. But as he was just saying, boxing addict, he also is getting on the downside of his career. So I mean, he may be slipping as well, and this might show a little more. And hopefully Smith can finish the job, stop him late, the early body work.
I'll go to you. Mute your mic right quick, Sean.
Yeah.
If Smith can fight the level he did the first time and throw more punches, he will win. He will win by decision. But if he slips and falls off, Abraham has a chance to catch him and hurt him. Your thoughts on this rematch Saturday in Berlin?
Sorry, that directed at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Smith has. I think he has every chance to take this one. He's got the same skills he did the first time. A little better knowledge, having gone some rounds with Abraham now, and a motivation. And just like we were talking about with Nonito Donaire losing his motivation, Smith now has the added motivation of proving, yes, I did win that first fight, and I'm going to show you that I can do it for real now and get the result on paper that I should have got the first time now that I've gotten a fairer shake. I think that this one is his, and that sets up for these guys a trilogy.
Ah, interesting.
Well, that would tick Felix Sturm off because he wants Abraham. He wants Abraham to win because if he does, he's going to shoot for a shot at Abraham. So he wouldn't like that at all.
Well, he might not, and not to say that the third fight comes immediately after this one. Frequently these guys then go out, take a spin with a couple of other dance partners, and they get to the point where the only real option for them, along the lines of a Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado, is they end up fighting each other again, and one guy gets to continue his career, and the other guy is done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to shut things down on that note. Um, for next week on the pound for pound, well, first of all, let's get matters out the way. I'll go to you on this one, Gail. For folks who want to talk boxing or anything else, let the folks know where they can find you.
I write my column Ringside Seat for Communities Digital News, and that's easy to Google, Communities Digital News. It's com with 2 M's, diginews.com. You can hit me up on Twitter. If there's a fight on and I'm watching, I'm also tweeting with a lot of other folks that are wildly entertaining in the boxing world. So Twitter's the place to find that, and I'm at PR Pro San Diego, where it's 75 degrees. Sorry, guys.
You know, that's wrong. That's wrong.
Notice no sleeves, no sleeves. Sun's out, guns out. It's February, man.
Considering how it's going to be in the single digits tonight where I live, that's just wrong.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what temperature it is right now at 8:39 p.m. Pacific. It's 58 degrees.
Yeah, that's just rude. Rude.
Yeah.
And,
Sorry.
while I'm going at it with Gail, I want to make a little bit of an announcement here for those who have been checking out the podcast and the live YouTube show. I've been talking about having an all ladies episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Well, things are pretty much set. We will have that show, and Gail will take part of it. We will have that show on April the 9th. Thursday, April the 9th, we will have an all-women's episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. And fingers crossed, if a certain fight is made, we will have a part 2. But definitely that first episode is April 9th. Gail will be taking part of that, as well as past guests, KBC Live, Kayla Lewis, Giandra LaBeouf of Bad Culture Net, the one and only Doo Brown, and we may have another guest, but look for the FLO, for ladies only episode of the Pound for Pound Box Report that will happen Thursday, April the 9th, and I'm really looking forward towards that. Sean Newton, for those who want to talk boxing or anything else, let the folks know where they can find you.
I'm all over YouTube, so I'm sure you've seen me around. And I drop comments left, right, and center. And coming to Asia, Happy New Year, Chinese New Year.
Yeah, you're the GOAT, greatest of all time.
The one and only boxing addict. For those who want to talk boxing or anything else, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, get me on YouTube. So I'm also on there.
Mute your mic, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I'm on YouTube, so you can get me on there. I don't tweet or generally do much of that, but yeah, you can get me on there. And I'd just like to say to Gail, it's 3 degrees here. So I'm not going to burst into song, 3 degrees.
Oh, that's brutal. Brutal.
Yeah, and happy Chinese New Year to you, Sean. I'll actually be going to Wales to celebrate a belated Chinese New Year next Saturday, so that should be good fun.
And for those who want to talk boxing or anything else with me, y'all know what it is. Brother JR76 on Twitter. You can find me there. If you want to find out anything about the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, again, check out the blog page. That's the best source. P4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. And repeat that, P4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. If you check on the page on the right side of the page, it will provide links where to find us all on social media. The link for the live YouTube show on YouTube, the podcast page, where to find us on Facebook, on Google Plus, the 2 Google Plus pages, on Tumblr, Pinterest. We've got a Pinterest board on Podomatic, the RSS feed where you can subscribe to, where to find us on Stitcher Radio, as well as the link to donate your account. On the next episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we will do a recap of Triple G and Martin Murray, the bout between Butler and Silvestri, as well as the rematch between Abraham and Smith. And we will also do a review of those bouts and a preview of Carl Frampton as he's making his first title defense in Northern Ireland against #1 contender Chris Avalos. Tyson Fury is going to be fighting on that same day, on the 28th. And we will talk about Chris Eubank Jr. fighting for an interim belt, not because it's a real championship belt, but just to shade the WBA for, one, giving Eubank Jr. an opportunity for a title shot he really doesn't deserve, and B, call out the WBA for the fraudulent organization that it is, really, because this is the fact that this is a world title fight is ridiculous. So we will talk about all those things. I want to thank Gail in San Diego, Shaw in Taiwan, live from Taiwan, the one and only Boxing Addict in the UK for joining me this week. I want to thank them. I'm your host, Michael. This has been another episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. We will see you next time. Good night.
Good night, all.
Yep, good night.